I'm Dane Rose, and I want to welcome you to Medicina, a Costa Rican community and experiment in evolving culture. And I think the best way to begin is with disclaimers, is with looking at the devil's advocate. In other words, why wouldn't you want to participate in a community that promises to be less expensive than most Western living situations, have significantly nicer weather than 90% of the globe, have organic, fresh, local food, which is about as healthy as it can get when it's local and fresh. Because it's local and organic, you are being fed the very nutrients that are needed for that environment, as fresh as it can possibly be, with as little ecological footprint, and the chance to grow and do physical exercise, etc., just brings out the taste in food all the more. And so there's a tremendous appreciation in the value of the five senses. When so many of the irritants, whether it's two-stroke blower engines in residential communities, such as the one I live in the US, or the smell of diesel fumes, or loud noises coming in from neighbors' TVs, when so many of the irritants are reduced, and when the psychological crises of invisibility, loneliness, the difficulty forming sustainable friendships, the difficulty learning the art of mating well with a compatible partner in a way that leads to both of your development. So why wouldn't you want to move towards all of that with a lower amount of hours worked each day for work? And in an either-or paradigm, it's a no-brainer. You've got to do it, right? But one of the areas that we're very good at lying in our cult of conformity, our cult of picking a political side and criticizing everything the other side is doing. In our culture of conformity, we're very good at either or. So I think it's useful to look at everything that can and may go wrong in this journey. Well, the first thing is that all cultures, particularly our predominant cultures in the world today, are largely institutionalized or brainwashed in by trauma. The violence, the shame, the humiliation, the fear, the abandonment, the ridicule that is directed at a child, an infant, an adolescent, as they diverge from the herd, whether it's in sexuality or religion or the, quote, divergent from the appropriate feminine-masculine balance, whether it's their interests, etc., as individuals emerge in our cult, we subject them to a tremendous barrage of trauma in order to protect ourselves as a myopic and somewhat traumatized cult from our own fear of the unknown. Now, as a result of that barrage of biological programming, of psychological programming, anytime you diverge from the norm, it tends to trigger our greatest fear, which in a traumatized individual within traumatized cult is the fear of the unknown, is the fear of change, is the fear of being out of control. Because when you've been severely abused and traumatized, you feel helpless, you feel small, and there's often a tremendous amount of hatred of oneself and the abuser and the world that does nothing. That is medicated by a statement in childhood and adolescence that I'm never going to let anyone do this to me again. And in order to add some weight to that statement, one of our core strategies is to stay in control. I'm never going to give anyone else the ability to surprise me, to shock me, to hurt me, which ironically and paradoxically also leads to the reality where in our guarded defenses, no one really has the ability to give us a surprise gift, to really deeply touch us in a meaningful way. But that's fine as long as we never feel that way again. Well, whenever you change something radically and as fundamental as the cult dogmas or the doctrines or the protocols of a living and new culture, you enter unfamiliar terrain. And whenever you enter the unknown, you lose control. You cannot rationally say that I'm going into a completely new environment that I don't fully understand, which is what happens anytime we do a major change, but I'm in complete control. I'm not, you're not, we're not in control. But because it's been framed that being out of control is the biggest danger, that's what we did wrong when we were hurt, to surrender control voluntarily or otherwise feels like it is the danger itself. As a result, the new culture, the new environment, is framed within the traumatic brain as the enemy. That's different. That's not what I expected. You shouldn't be doing this, right? Yeah, because why? Because I'm out of control. So it's a little bit much to ask traumatized members of a traumatized cult that have been brainwashed into a large degree of conformity to say, well, I'm just going to let go of all that. The body and the body memories, those younger ages, will send 10,000 messages saying, don't do it, you're going to die, you're going to be out of control, it's terrible, this is all happening all over again. And so there's a lot that can go wrong, because when you believe that memory, when you believe that dynamic in your body, anyone that suggests change or does something different is the enemy, is the figurehead, the symbol of that worst nightmare, and to be protected against and to hide, etc. And when you're trying to grow a conscious, transparent community with people that are busily trying to hide at every turn, it's bound to fail. And so you're basically asked to overcome that. And probably as a traumatically illiterate individual, meaning until I was 41, 42, I didn't even know what trauma was, let alone, its many expressions, let alone how I was hiding from the unknown. And just because I've figured out what it is and what it was for 5 or 6 years, that doesn't mean that I'm a master in a traumatically illiterate culture of how to deal with your trauma or mine. And it certainly doesn't mean that you're a master at being able to, help make good progress in areas of cultural development without triggering all of my worst nightmares and biological memories. And so that's, ding, 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 ding. That's warning number one. And it correlates predictably to a 95% failure rate in intentional community. So there's a 95% chance, statistically speaking, that what we're embarking upon right now is going to fail. Now, this puts us in the situation of Elon Musk when he started SpaceX, Tesla, and SolarCity. three businesses that all of his friends and all of the statistics said have a 90+% probability of failing. 95% of all car companies, startups fail, was the statistic when Elon started Tesla. No electric car company was thriving. Most of the conventional car companies that had been around for, 50 to 100 to 200 years had declared bankruptcy, had gone through a bankruptcy. So it wasn't a good statistical picture. Solar, losing money constantly. Space, no private company had ever even gotten off the ground and become sustainable, let alone profitable, let alone a great hit. So Elon was starting three companies with a 90% chance of failure. And he knew it, and his friends knew it, and everyone advised him not to do it. If you read the book, it's a nice one by the biography by Ashley Vance. His friends went so far as to put together videos of all the companies in these sectors that had failed, because Elon had just gotten a payout from eBay for PayPal of around, I think it was $200 to $400 million. And what rich kids are supposed to do is become playboys, buy Lamborghinis, buy an island, and become famous for being famous. And obviously, a few $100 million is an ample sum to do that. And this is the cult dogma. You're rich, you're supposed to buy more and more things and, live richly. Well, Elon isn't doing that. He just bought a $50,000 apartment that kind of compartmentally opens up, in part to support the direction of low-cost housing for our homeless. And he put all of his money, 100% of it, into these three companies with a 90% chance of failure. And the mindset was not to do these because they're easy or do these things because they're statistically likely to succeed, but rather to make an effort to succeed because they're important, and that failing to do a good thing is better than succeeding to do a mediocre or a wrong thing, a bad thing. We don't need more rampant consumerist billionaires. We do need sustainable energy. We do need to become multiplanetary before the next asteroid wipes out the humans and every information system on the planet, as it did the dinosaurs. We do need diversity in location to preserve seeds of life, to become interplanetary. And we need sustainable energy. We do need smog reduction for the 4 million people dying of lung diseases in smog-ridden cities. We need that. And so to fail, to spend $200 million and work 100 hours a week to fail at those things was better in Elon's mind than it was to succeed at being a playboy, which it doesn't really take very much effort when you've got a few $100 million. And so it's in that spirit that we're looking at Medicina, a statistic with a 95% probability of failure. Now let's look at some of the other headwinds that we're dealing with. And the fear of death, which is connected with the fear of change, which is connected with any identity shift, which is connected to fear of the unknown. We're looking and dealing and engaging with the fear of death. It's not an insignificant fear. We're also doing the opposite of many reptilian protocols, meaning the more you're traumatized, the more your reptilian brain is activated. The more your reptilian brain is activated, the more blood flows to the reptilian brain. The more you look at the world in a fear-based paradigm of fight, flight, freeze, and please. So the protocols of the competent sociopath in a traumatized state trying to survive, is to dominate that which is smaller than it. If you look at all the history of humanity, the dominant culture has typically treated the minorities in its midst poorly. So to dominate and exploit and attack what is smaller, to run from what is bigger, what is stronger, to freeze and or hide if neither of those options are expedient. And then as human animals, we have added the pleaser as another competent, power-broking protocol for responding to our fears in a world where many things are bigger than we are. And it basically means we find someone powerful who agrees to defend us if we do their dirty work. The pleaser, the prostitute, that is basically, you protect me and I'll do what you want me to do. I'll make you happy if you protect me out of fear that I cannot protect myself. And so these are the faces of the reptilian brain, and they're active all around us, bullying and abuse of power when nobody's looking, running away and being afraid of the world, freezing and being unable to move in overwhelm, and looking for powerful people to please, whether it's women looking for rich men, or men looking for rich women, or women looking for powerful men, or men trying to join powerful companies that will protect them, and da-da-da. So none of this is workable within a 10x living environment where we're moving from the reptilian brain to the empathic brain. But to do that, to successfully move from the reptilian brain to the empathic brain, we have to move through scarcity into abundance, the belief in scarcity and the reality of scarcity into the belief in abundance, and enough reality that we can believe that abundance. Because the reptilian protocol is effective in a world of scarcity. It is painful and unnecessary in a world of abundance. And so can we create a microclimate of abundance that feeds blood to the rational and the empathic brain and makes the reptilian brain more and more redundant? That's a challenge in an education system, in a cult that does not teach the generation of abundance, that does not teach the generation of wealth. So we've got a lot of headwinds. Now, then there's the legal framework. The dominant cult has largely institutionalized more than 1,000 separate protocols for living, whether it's engineering, whether it's water sources, whether it's the way land is broken up, whether it is how things are taxed, whether it is the way someone can be buried, whether it is the way someone can be born, whether it is the way someone can do medicine. You know, there is just so much institutionalized mediocrity that is written into law, and Medicina is skirting a lot of that, you know, by being in Costa Rica in a large piece of land. But, you know, that also creates a vulnerability. You know, the government in any cult, the dominant system in any cult, is bigger and traumatized and threatened by change. And so how to create something new that doesn't get killed long enough that it can produce a track record that can create a basis for saying, hey, this is not a threat to anyone. This is exactly the medicine we need as a world, as an individual, as a group. So that is a wild card, you know, around the whole framework of the land. And it's an important thing to understand that abuse of power and just enforcing all of the laws of Costa Rica to the extreme can wreak havoc on a tremendous amount of these protocols. Now, I've moved it out of the US, because, the U.S. is, incredibly paranoid about divergencies in culture. You can look at things, such as Rajneesh's attempt in I think it's the Netflix series Wild Wild West. You can look at the Chinese atrocities against Tibet. There's a tremendous animosity towards divergence. Hong Kong is a much better experiment than is mainland China. But mainland China is trying to make Hong Kong worse, like itself, so that they'll be the same. You see it in parents as well, that kind of claw at their children, transcending the cult dogmas of the family system, or of one person in a group of friends becoming wealthy, whereas the others do not. And so there's a lot of energy and fear around change. And so there's a fragility around this. I want to talk about a couple of other things, because we have, among our other risks, just briefly, the fact that most of us are not adults. We've grown up, but we don't actually know who we really are, and how that differs from the cult identity we've adopted. We don't know that. Many of us, through trauma, are stuck at a young age. I'm stuck at a number of ages. Or we're stuck in adolescence, the rebellion without the willingness to replace the corrupt or faulty system with a better system. It's like, rebel against the system, down with the man. Great, but what's your idea? Like, where's your competence to running a complex organization that is sustainable and ecological? Well, we just all do what we want to do, right? It's back to chaos, back to infancy. And this is one reason that 95% of communities fail. You can't just criticize the status quo. You actually have to understand it enough to do something better. And we don't teach cultural design and system design in the cult, which is convenient for the cult that is afraid of change, because as soon as you have the eyes to see how a cult could be better, you're inviting change. So many of us are immature in a variety of ways, and immature children are not competent enough to become their own parents, basically, and create the culture that they then submit to, because we need protocols. If everyone drives on every side of the road, you could call it freedom, or you could call it the best way to get nowhere fast and have a lot of accidents. Because if everyone is driving in every different angle on what is traditionally a two-way road, you have to drive 5 miles an hour, or because you don't know what the other drivers are going to do. They bang into you, and you have to just traffic grinds to a halt. And so you actually have to create new structures, and they have to be better than the old structures, not worse, which means you've got to be able to analyze and do design, which most of us don't have that talent. So big blind spot, big challenge there. And the other thing is the childlike call for the womb, the perfect place before we were born. This is not that. This is an evolution of culture, an evolution of system, meaning it's taking a number of flaws within current cult systems and it's iterating them for the better, hopefully. But that's not perfection. It's not laying around being fed by an umbilical cord to the Great Mother as we just bliss out and let mom do all the work walking around. That call for nirvana, for the perfect place where it's all going to work out and we're all going to love each other and we're not going to have any fights and going to be completely ecological and it's going to be free. It's going to be wonderful, and we're going to change the world. That is a lot of the energy with which people seek community. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. And this is a child's vision of the perfect childhood that never happened, and that never will happen, within the framework of physicality and duality and all of that. So what happens when a lot of people, myself included, because don't think that in any way I'm immune from any of this, right? Because that can be another mistake, is to project, some kind of figurehead or whatever on someone, like they don't have these issues, they get it, whatever. No, I am a child of my cult, and have all of these hurdles to go over as much as anyone else. I may be better at talking about them than you are, but you may be better at going over some of them than I am, right? And so there's a big difference between the head knowledge of saying this is the way things should be, and actually learning to do it for 3 years in a row with someone that pushes your buttons. Completely different, scenario. And so, so when people move towards community, the one, the nirvana, the ecology, the organic, the this, there can be an idea that this is heaven, that this is nirvana. And this is rudely awakened as you realize, oh, I don't qualify. I'm being held to standards. I don't like that. There's structures. I didn't agree to those structures. Children, as they move into adolescence, are always rebelling against whatever order is there. No one's going to tell me what to do. But the point is, somebody has to tell you what to do. And ideally, it is a highly intelligent adult using the best data and science available to suggest your odds of improving your well-being are the best if you head in this direction. And you don't have to listen, but you don't have to be happy either, right? You can piss away your life with mediocre rebellions and die fat flipping through channels because nobody's going to tell you where to tune the TV, right? And wonder where your life went, living in constant adolescence of rebellion against this and rebellion against that. Rebellion is wonderful if you have the maturity, the intelligence, and the resources to create a better system that works better, and the discipline to try it out, keep working at it until it succeeds, and then share it with other people and improve your life. It's wonderful when you have that discipline. But just rebellion, no one's going to tell me, why should you be the one doing this, all this, adolescent energy, needs to be grounded in competence, in skill, in hard work. And so, ironically, I've never worked harder in my life. I mean, when you're just going through life as an individual, doing things the way they're done, I don't need to invent a bank. I don't need to invent an app. I don't have to make and save money. I've never had to save money in my life, right? And suddenly I've got this community project that requires like $1.1 million in basic infrastructure just to begin. And I'm in a cult where no bank is going to give me that money. And so suddenly I have to work harder to figure out how to make money, to figure out how to invest money, to figure out exactly how to save money, right? So my life is becoming more challenging, more disciplined, more talented. I'm having to work harder in multiple directions simultaneously, physically, emotionally, mentally, financially, having to learn all of these skills. So that's not nirvana. That's not the bliss of just laying back and letting it all be wonderful. It's not nirvana, right? It's working harder, working smarter. And that's in the initial role of Medicina. Those are the people that are necessary to form a core dynamic that is possible. Perhaps 20 years from now, 30 years from now, we can have warm pools for bathing babies of all ages to arrive in the bliss and this and that and the other. But to form that actually requires more analysis, more work, more system organizing, more structure to my own life, to your life, etc. So that can be a rude awakening for the one seeking nirvana. So with all those disclaimers, with all that awareness, what are we doing here? Well, let's first of all be clear that there's no reason I should know what I'm doing around this. I don't know about you, but whether it was in high school, college, mandatory reading, parental upbringing, your last job, nobody sat me down and said, here's how you design a culture, here's where to do it, here's how to fund it, here's the people that should join it, here's how you meet those people. So this is an innovative journey. And at this stage, we're looking for innovative, intelligent, competent, hardworking people that want to take the next step to make things concretely better, more than have, for example, endless discussions, which is one area that consensus-based communities collapse regularly. Is, if everyone takes time off work for 3 months to discuss, should we have strawberry yogurt or vanilla yogurt, or are dairy products a bad idea for any healthy community because they create cow dependency? And any group of people who, blow, with 30 people, maybe $500,000 in salaries over a few months to discuss yogurt, are going to run out of money and time and resources before they get a single building built. And so that's part of, the crisis. And the statistics are also clear that just one person can, quadruple the amount of wasted time, et cetera, in a debate or something like that, in a discussion. And so I don't have that energy, and I don't have that money, and I don't have that time. What I do have is 40 years of analysis, a lot of design talent and experience, a lot of articulating talent through writing books and analyzing things, a lot of relational science through writing books. For example, the Co-Creating Conscious Chemistry book is really a scientific analysis of many of the psychological variables in chemistry and relationship. And, data from time with 100 lovers, 20 of which, well above average, and what works and those things. So there's a lot of experience, some at, biodynamic farms, Waldorf communities, Findhorn, a very successful community in Scotland, a lot of reading about failed communities. So I do have a context. And I have a sense of what I can work with, which is by no means, saying that the people and things that I can't work with don't have use and value. It's just they don't have use and value to me in this project if I can't work with them. I would love it if you have the skill, the resources, the time to create a rendition of this that's different, that works, that I can come and stay at and visit with. And I may not fit with your paradigm, but if I do, that would be so nice. I haven't seen that, unfortunately, in my looks for different places to be. And so I'm creating that. And so what this really is an attempt to filter for the kind of person that is willing to work harder than average, to spend more than average, to think more than average, to learn more than average, to face fear more than average, to do things differently, significantly more than average, so that, and that feels compatible with enough of this so that it's because when you have differences, it's like connecting two batteries together that are reversed, right? I think we should do this. Well, I think we should do that. Well, when you connect two charged batteries, they both drain each other and create sparks. And so you want to create flow. So you want the strong currents of energy to be aligned. It doesn't matter what they're aligned with. If you want flow, you want them to be aligned. And so, one of the things that I'm doing in the creation of the dimensional aspects, the 10x design and dimensions, the ideal, is providing you with the opportunity to read and study and see about the compatibility. Is this your dream come true? Is this not perfect at all, but a big improvement to your status quo such that it is a net big benefit? It's the best place in the world for you, even though 30% of it doesn't work for you. Every other place in the world, 40, 50, 60, 70% doesn't work for you. So this is a great step forward for the next number of years in your life. That's what we're looking for. And so that's really the first step, because a good filter allows anyone capable of doing the things that they're being asked to do through the filter, and blocks anyone who can't do the things they're being asked to do. Well, at this stage, you're being asked to attune and to align, to think, to know yourself, and to work harder, to have more discipline, to spend more time, to be more aware. Now, the filter of the dimensional analysis of 10x living requires all that. You can't have your mind split and distracted and figure out what I'm saying and whether it aligns with you. You can't not know yourself and know if it aligns with you or not. You can't write about it unless you can think clearly, unless you can know yourself. You can't spend 50 hours going through all this if you're lazy. If you're looking for an easier way out, just watch TV and watch porn and drink Coke. It may lead to an early and mediocre life, but it is easy compared to growing, discovering who you are, at least from a certain perspective. For the ego, it's very easy to destroy the self in order to seek comfort in addiction. For the self, it is a state of despair to be drowned in mediocrity, in dogma and addiction, to have the initial spark of individuality crushed by the weight of the cult, by the fear of the bully. And so, where do you take your stand? Is it with the self? Is it with the cult internalized as the ego? They both have a role, they both have a place, they both have a perspective. But this is exploring more freedom, more grace, more ease for the self to be itself, which means diverging from the cult, which means working hard, but which is easier than dying the slow death of despair, depression, rage, envy, and isolation.